finish up there so we can make sure everyone is good to go. All right. All right. Looks like a good amount of folks are moderate here on that are coming in. All right. Got a few people that are minimal and some people that identified none or even extensive. So, okay. All right. All right. So that being said, we'll go ahead and begin our webinar for today. So welcome everyone, and again, thank you all for joining. My name is William Moore with OJJDP TTA, and welcome to the Safety Matters Helping Families Affected by Substance Use Disorders and Domestic Violence Move from Survivors to Thrivers. This is part of our Cafe Conversations with our colleagues at the Children and Family Futures organization. Their contact information is located on this slide where you can reach out to them if you have any questions related to today's webinar. Please note that this webinar will indeed be recorded on our YouTube and be placed on our YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see other archived events that we have. If you'd like to get access to any supporting materials related to today's webinar, you can feel free to reach out to the OJJDP TTA Help Desk, and the contact information is here on this slide. For those who are wishing to download important documents related to today's webinar, you may do so on the handouts pod that's located directly next to the chat pod, and it says handouts at the top in the gray bar there. You will just simply click on the name of the document and then click the download button, and you'll be able to download the files that we have there. Please note that we will, this is the Cafe Conversations, but there will be a chance where you can, of course, ask any questions to our panel here. To do so, just simply type your question into the chat box, and we'll be sure to get it over to our moderator. That will then be sure to answer your question. We'll try to do our best to get as many questions as we can today, but just simply type your question into the chat box and select enter or hit the bubble next to it, and that'll send your question right on over for today's presentation. Let's go ahead and get a quick count of how many people we have, and this is specifically a group count. So individuals who are logged in, if you're logged in and you're viewing today's webinar with additional people or other folks, then please help us count. Type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today, not including yourself. So for example, it's me and my dog with me here. I would say there's 2 people, or me and my mom is with me, then there's one other person. I'm not including myself. So type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you're viewing with 2 other folks, type 2. You're viewing one other person, type 1, 3, etc. All right, and thank you all for providing those numbers. If you're viewing by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. I should have said that earlier. My apologies. Please note that individuals who are signed in will get a certificate of attendance, okay? That certificate of attendance will be provided through an Adobe Connect automated email where you'll receive this certificate. However, those who are attending in a group, if you'd like the individuals that are attending with you that are viewing today's webinar to receive the certificate, please download the group validation form in the handouts pod and send it over to OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov, and we can get the certificate to those additional people that are viewing the webinar with you today. That being said, we're going to go ahead and start our cafe conversation. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Tessa, for today's discussion. Tessa, take it away.
Thank you so much, William. Welcome, everyone, for joining us today. We're excited to see all of you. Looks like we have about 375 folks on today to join us on this topic. It's great to hear that there's a large number of you with us with a moderate level of expertise in this. So we are excited to dive into some of the more complicated topics here and talk about how to best serve families at the intersection of substance use, domestic violence, and child welfare. My name is Tessa Richter. I am a Senior Program Associate with Children and Family Futures. We are an organization based in California, and we work nationally at the to help improve outcomes for children and families affected by substance use, mental health, and trauma involved in the child welfare system. We are funded, one of our contracts is through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, which I think a lot of you received this webinar notification through their listserv, so thank you OJJDP for that. And they fund a contract through the Family Treatment Court Training and Technical Assistance Program. So this webinar is part of a Family Treatment Court Learning Academy package, which I'll talk about what that is in a moment. But we know that many of you who are on are not specifically from family treatment courts. And so we are going to be talking a lot about the intersections at child welfare and substance abuse and domestic violence, and not necessarily super specific to family treatment courts. Although our judge, Martinez Jones, who's on the panel, she is a family treatment court judge. Just to relieve any confusion, family treatment courts are a treatment court model that work in the child welfare system to serve families affected by substance use disorders. We would love to talk more about family treatment courts. We have lots of resources about those. Please go to our website, which we'll drop in the chat, cffutures.org for that. So today, we are really diving into this topic of, like I said, at the intersection of substance abuse, domestic violence, and child welfare. And we have 4 wonderful panelists who will be speaking at the national, state, and local levels to give us some ideas about where things are in the field, how to best serve families, and just some of the nuances about these intersections. This is one of our Learning Academy packages. Our FTC Learning Academy takes topics that we get a lot of different requests for, a lot of interest in from across the country in the field, and we try to bring some ideas to everyone, and so that's what we're doing here today. After the webinar, you will receive some follow-up resources via email and will be on our website, including a resource guide and a take action guide. So the resource guide, we often in these Learning Academy packages release a video, a pre-recorded video with some basic information. For this topic, we felt that there was already so many good resources out there that it didn't make sense to remake the wheel, recreate the wheel. And so the resource guide you will see has a lot of great resources around Domestic Violence 101, how to work at the intersection, serving special populations, those sort of things to help your teams. The Take Action Guide will have about 4 steps for your team to help take some of this information and put it into practice. So watch your email and our website for those, and my colleague Rush just dropped that in the chat as well. So our structure today, I will quit talking soon because we want to get to the panelists and their experience and expertise as quickly as possible. We have some pre-selected topics based off the questions you all submitted when you registered. So we'll take about an hour and have our panelists answer those questions. In the meantime, as we're talking, please drop questions, comments, thoughts into the chat box. We would love for you all to connect with each other, ask us questions, ask each other questions about these topics to share information. I will put some of those questions to our panelists throughout, and then specifically that last 25 minutes, 30 minutes or so, we will do kind of live Q&A from the audience. So please drop in those questions. We'll answer some through the chat, some live. And that's where we're at. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to start, we always start these live conversations by asking our panelists to introduce themselves and to talk about their why. Why is this topic important to you? Why do you do this work? So I would like to start with Shelley.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here with all of you, and thanks, Tessa. So this is a topic that's sort of near and dear to my heart and has been really the entirety of my professional career pretty much. I'm a survivor of domestic violence myself. I now run the Quality Improvement Center on Domestic Violence in Child Welfare at Futures Without Violence. So for anybody who doesn't know, Futures Without Violence is a national nonprofit. We work in a lot of different arenas to offer technical assistance and program development and so forth to end violence against women and children. We've been at this for a few decades now. So as I said, I am a survivor of domestic violence. That was many years ago. I was actually in an abusive relationship with a person who was an alcoholic, had addiction issues. And the interesting thing about that is that at the time that I was in the relationship, and granted I was sort of young at the time, but when I was in the relationship, I didn't actually really think of it as an abusive relationship. I thought of myself as being in a relationship with a person with an addiction, and that the violence that I experienced was really sort of an outcropping, right, of the addiction. And it wasn't actually until years later, after I had done my own work and my healing work, that I was able to really clearly see the ways that my partner had been controlling me, including at the times when, you know, he wasn't drinking, for example. So, you know, it became clear to me, I think, at that time that there had been more going on than I was actually sort of able to see in that moment. And once I got started, you know, I came from domestic violence services. That's where I started my work around domestic violence. So I worked in a community-based program providing legal advocacy and doing volunteer coordination. And then I got interested in really thinking about the whole family. So I joined the board of a program that ran battering intervention programs, but also had support groups for men who had been traumatized as kids. Then decided to start working in the child welfare system. So I did about 8 years as a domestic violence specialist within child welfare, and then became a consultant, and it continued from there. And so for about the past 3.5 years, I've been running the Quality Improvement Center on Domestic Violence in Child Welfare, and I'd be happy to talk more about that later.
Thank you, Shelley. Rhonda, would you please introduce yourself and share your why?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good morning, depending on where you are. So thank you so much. I am honored to be here with this distinguished guest and panelists. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm Rhonda Fleming, and I am the Director of Education and Outreach at the Women's Center and Shelter of Greater Pittsburgh. I've been working there for 30 consecutive years in 2 weeks. So I just actually crossed 30 years. And it's funny, I didn't know Shelley now. I've been knowing Shelley for a few years now and didn't know some of the similarities in our story. But I'm going to start off by sharing just a story about my why, and then I'll come to what I do at Women's Center and Shelter. But my story at my why, when I started at Women's Center and Shelter many years ago, I was interviewed for a radio talk show. So I went in and I did the interview, and I was new. This was, I think, in my first year, no more than my second year, but I really think it was in my first year. So I went in for this interview, and the interviewer, the host, journalist, whichever title he had, he asked me why I had come to do this work. Prior to coming to Women's Center and Shelter, I worked in a group home for adolescents, and I did individual, group, family counseling, went up the ranks to become a supervisor of the girls' group home, and I was there for about 10 years. Well, while I was there, we had a trainer come in, and the trainer leapt up on the table while he was doing his training, and I thought it was so exciting, and something inside me leapt inside me as well. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be a trainer just like him. I want to do that. So when the opportunity came to work at Women's Center and Shelter for the training department, I'm like, yes, this is what I want to do. So the interviewer asked me this question, but he asked me about 6 different times, 6 different ways. So when I went back to my office the next day, I said to my supervisor, he asked me the same question 6 times. I kept telling him I wanted to be a trainer. So I came to this work to learn about being a trainer, and I work now in education, and I was real happy about that. So she looked at me and smiled and said, he was trying to ask you if you've been formerly abused. I said, oh. Well, he should have just asked me that because I didn't get it. I didn't catch on that that's what he really was asking me. So I didn't come to this work at that time as a survivor. I didn't come to the work for healing of therapy. But I certainly can tell you that's what has been revealed to me, that this journey was chosen for me. I didn't actually choose it. So I actually came to this work, as I said, to be a trainer and to be an educator around intimate partner violence, domestic violence. And during that time, it has also been a very healing process for me as well as a survivor of intimate partner abuse. So at Women's Center and Shelter, presently as the Education Director, Director of Education and Outreach, we have several programs, and one is that we're going to focus on primarily here today is our Battering Intervention program. And at Women's Center and Shelter, the name of our BIP program is MENS, in the acronym MENS, Men Embracing Nonviolence and Safety. When I went to Women's Center and Shelter, we weren't working with men yet. We didn't have a BIP program. And there was just something inside me that did not rest. I always wanted us to work with men. It was at that time, our mission statement was to end violence in the lives of women and children. And I thought, how do you complete the puzzle if you only work with half of the puzzle or certain parts? And never to diminish the importance of working with survivors and survivors' children. Extremely important, and I get that. And at the same time, I realized that if we really want to help families, then we really want to help the problem of intimate partner violence, we need to address who we believe are the perpetrators of intimate partner violence on a large scale. So I was delighted when I got the opportunity just around 12 years ago to work in our Battering Intervention program. We also have other programs. We have in our outreach department, we have the REAL team, which is Refugee, Immigrant, and Limited English Speaking. We also have LGBTQ plus advocate. We have our outreach advocate who does groups in the community. And we have a CYF program that I'm sure I'm going to get the opportunity to talk more about today. But I do want to say that's a big part of our collaboration with CYF. So that's the programs we have in our education. Oh, I'm sorry, we have a medical advocate. She'd be very angry if I didn't mention her. We have medical advocacy in the education and outreach department as well. So thank you, Tessa. And again, that's why I do this work.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. And just want to say thank you to Rhonda and to Shelley for sharing your stories. We appreciate that. Kim, can we go to you next for your introduction and your why?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel today. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed my dogs are going to stay quiet. So we'll do that. So my name is Kim Shapiro, and I am currently the director at the Substance Use Unit at the Department of Children and Families in Massachusetts. Couple different reasons why I came to this work. I will first explain what I do at the department. I am the leader of a substance use unit of 17 people, 17 coordinators whose role it is to work with the field staff, basically the whole workforce from social workers all the way through to management. They work on a couple different levels. They provide case level consultation, trainings to the workforce on substance use disorders as well as an impact on children. And they also work cross systems to improve communication and collaboration among the treatment programs or any programs that service families, and to improve communication so that our families can have access to the services that they need, as well as to work with the child welfare workforce to accurately assess parental substance use disorders. So I started my career as a child welfare worker, as a frontline worker in the early 90s. And as a baby social worker, I knew early on that I really needed additional training. If I knew then what I know now, I think I would have been a better social worker. I didn't have, every single family probably I had even back in the 90s had some substance use disorder issues. We certainly addressed them a lot differently than we do now. So I left the department, went on to get my master's degree, and worked in a clinical capacity up until 2014. And as a clinician, I said to myself, I didn't want to work in substance use disorders, but I wanted to be trained in them. That wasn't the work I wanted to do. However, my first internship by choice was to work in a women's day treatment program for substance use disorders and within an addiction agency. And since that point, I have never left. I learned there that I had so much admiration and respect for the work that women do and the resiliency of women with substance use disorders, and also learned very early in that work that relationships and the impact of healthy or violent or trauma that results from some domestic violence relationships, it certainly is a direct correlation to the success women were having in their families as well as their substance use disorder journey, treatment journey. Back then we didn't call it substance use disorders. So I returned to the department. I then went on to work in a treatment system that offered both detox all the way through to residential treatment. And while I was working there, I obviously worked with co-occurring issues of trauma, mental health, domestic violence, and substance use. Not domestic violence, that wasn't necessarily part of our program at that point. But what I learned in that and witnessed firsthand, although that wasn't part of what we focused on, the treatment system didn't always fit with women and men who were dealing with domestic violence in their lives, whether that it was a perpetrator or a survivor. Often for women, I would hear them on the phone, and not only did they have the maternal guilt of being in treatment and being away from their families, the struggle and the phone conversations of you need to get home, and that there was this influence of the phone conversations and the lack of engagement as a family in treatment that really impacted their success and how they were able to, attend to what they needed to do to address their substance use at the time in treatment. And for the men, it was to be able to give up this sort of control that they have. One model of treatment would say you have to recognize that you have lost control of your substance use, and that whole control piece there, and telling a survivor you have to surrender to your disease and that you are powerless over your disease, and to a survivor of trauma, that doesn't necessarily match up. And this was the treatment model we were working with at the time. So within that, I went back to the department in 2014 and said, this is where my roots are. I want to have a systemic approach to the work. I realized also in there that we weren't talking about women as parents, fathers as individuals in treatment as fathers and mothers. They were individuals, and we sometimes we would have the family work, but children and a role as a parent wasn't necessarily addressed. So fast forward 2014, I come back to the department, and what really focused me in on this work was a case consult that I did early on when I returned. I returned as a substance use coordinator and have since become the director. There was a woman who we received a request for consultation from the field, and this the report was around mothers. I think mother drove while intoxicated with the children. I spoke with the team, and again, we don't work directly with the families. I spoke with the team, and their request for consult was around, help me with understand mom's substance use disorder. What happened was, father was at an amusement park with all the 3 children. Mom was home, and father came home, and they found mom with a neighbor, not in any illicit, just there. What ended up happening in the story to me was mom was under the influence, and father was angry that the neighbor was there, assaulted her, police were called. That was why we got the call. I'm sorry, I switched those around. Father got the call. Father assaulted mother, police were called. But the narrative was mom was under the influence, and mom, even from the DCF worker, that mom's a mess. So in consultation, I asked them, I kind of switched the narrative and said, well, what happened to mom, right? Instead of what's wrong with mom, what happened to mom, right? What's mom's story? And as I found out, what was happening was father left with the children, took the keys to the lockbox. In the lockbox was Mom's Suboxone. Dad was basically forcing Mom into withdrawal and using his Suboxone, and she was going in and out of withdrawal. She asked the neighbor to come over to break into the lockbox, not to abuse the substances, but because she needed to get her Suboxone so she wouldn't go into withdrawal. That essentially the narrative was Mom was the identified problem. Mom had the substance use disorder, and nobody was addressing father's use of controlling Mom's substances and pretty much preventing her to get into treatment because she wasn't able to authentically get into treatment most of the times because she was in and out of withdrawal. So that's really, and then as I looked with folks to try and get treatment that could really manage both of these issues in a sensitive way, I struggled to find CV programs that could really work with Mom and not further embed the shame and blame and the guilt that goes with substance use disorders, but also on the flip side, a program that could manage and authentically work with Mom's co-occurring issues. So yeah, so that's what really brought me in to really focus in and hone on this work about since 2014. So that's really it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Along with your why, I think you gave us a really great kind of storyline or timeline of how we got to where we are. And I think, Shelley, I see you nodding your head there too. I think we've seen that a lot in the family treatment court world as well, where FTCs were serving families affected by substance use. And eventually we realized that families have a lot of issues going on, and you can't only focus on substance use without recognizing all the other things going on. And so what we've heard from a lot of sites recently is that domestic violence is one of those pieces that we just haven't figured out how to serve the whole family and address all these issues, which leads to a great segue for Judge Martinez-Jones to introduce herself and tell us your why. Judge?
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here and to be on this panel, so thank you for having me. My name is Aurora Martinez-Jones, and I am an associate judge in Travis County. That's in Austin, Texas. So we're in the heart of Texas, the capital of Texas, and I pretty much really have a desire to help people. I am a child of immigrants. My father is from Mexico and my mother is from Jamaica. So I was a child who grew up really helping my parents have a voice in the American culture, helping them to understand and translate just the way things work while I was a kid in school or whatever help they might have needed. And I really found a passion for really trying to help those people who don't often have their voices heard. And that passion really just carried forward with me. I didn't know any lawyers or judges growing up, but I was very interested in the most effective way that I could be a voice for those who need it, and the law seemed like a great approach. So as I went through college and law school, I was consistently considering how in my career as a lawyer I would be able to continue doing the work in a way that I felt would be fulfilling for my passion and really helpful. While I was a student at the University of Texas School of Law, I really got my first introduction to child welfare. I was a student attorney through our Children's Rights Clinic, and I was able to work in that community, which is the community I'm in now, and I was able to see how things really progress in the courtroom when we're talking about child welfare. At the same time, throughout law school, I was the research assistant for a wonderful professor, Sarah Buell, who has done so much extraordinary work in the field of advocacy for survivors of family violence and domestic violence. And she really was a huge part of me even getting into law school, just encouraging me and cheering me on. So I worked with her and got a real taste and understanding for the need for advocacy in this area, and that sparked my passion as well. I hadn't looked at that intersection quite yet as a student attorney, but as I was representing children and then also representing children who were in the juvenile justice system, I decided that's what I wanted to base my career on. And so I opened my own law practice right out of law school and getting licensed, and that was the most effective approach I could find to have control over helping the people who I felt needed the help the most. And so I signed up to be a court-appointed lawyer, and I took even private cases with people who had been victims of violence to try and help them to recover as best they can and navigate putting their lives back together. And I had an opportunity in 2015 to become an associate judge. I think through the work that I've done in child welfare, I was identified as a person who would do well on the bench, and I was appointed to my seat. And the interesting thing for me about the trajectory that I took is that as an attorney in private practice, I got to be a part of our model court here in Travis County. So through the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, we're a model court, meaning we commit to try innovative approaches to supporting the families and children that we work with. And I think that has been an amazing opportunity to really look at how we can improve our systems, how we can improve our practices and our policies to better do the work that we're doing so that we can support the children and families. And so we had our family drug treatment court get started in about 2008, and I got to be a parent attorney in that program. So I was representing the parents in our family drug treatment court since 2008. And as I progressed in my career and I became a judge, I now preside over that family drug treatment court. So I have the unique perspective of having worked with the parents in an advocacy role to understand in my relationship with them what some of those nuanced things are that they go through, some of the things that don't always come out in court, but understanding that there are a lot of considerations that are going on, a lot we're putting on the plates of our parents, a lot of expectations we have, especially when they are intersecting with the child welfare system and pretty much any other system. If they have domestic violence involved, that adds a layer. And I have been very excited because in my time, both as a lawyer and then as a judge, I've been able to create a strong relationship with my local advocacy organization, Safe Alliance, and they support survivors of abuse, exploitation, and domestic violence. And just having that relationship with them has led to some amazing things. Our advocacy organization is actually a part of our team for the Family Drug Treatment Court. And our Family Drug Treatment Court keeps the children with their parents while they go into treatment. Right now we only have a facility that accepts mothers with children under the age of 5. It's the school situation that causes the issue for going into treatment. But that facility is a partner with our Family Drug Treatment Court, and the majority of our mothers do go to that program or a couple of others that we have around the state so that we can start off looking at how we preserve a family instead of having to work a reunification. And then we bring in all our other providers like our advocacy organization to help support those parents with all of the issues that come up, especially when people do suffer from a substance use disorder. So being in this model court, being a part of this family drug treatment court from different perspectives, I've seen the intersections and the overlap. I'm also a part of a national cohort where we're looking at the intersection of the child welfare system, of domestic violence, and of race. And that's one of the other passions that I have, because we know that there are very desperate outcomes for people of color in almost all of these realms when we talk about domestic violence, when we talk about the child welfare system, when we talk about substance use and the way that substance use disorders are supported or not supported. And those are the things that have been really why I do this work, because I love the approach of innovation and being a part of a model court, but I really look at us moving past just innovation and reimagining. How can we reimagine to do this work in a better way, and then we can dismantle the pieces that are harmful and systemically inequitable? And that's really where I'm doing my work now, and why I really enjoy having conversations like this to tap into the expertise of so many others, because it really helps us to keep moving the ball forward. And let's go beyond just innovating, but let's reimagine, let's rebuild, and let's do this work better, smarter, and more equitable.
Thank you so much, Judge. You all are a model court in many, many ways, often due to your leadership. So thank you, and thank you for being on here.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to stick with you to talk about our next question, which is about the intersection of these issues that we're talking about, the intersections of child welfare, domestic violence, and substance use disorders. As you all have dived into this work, can you talk about what makes this intersection so complex and challenging?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. So when we start looking about how different systems play into each other and the intersection, it becomes very apparent how, especially when we're looking at the substance use disorder and issues with domestic violence in the family, how our systems come in and sometimes make things harder than they need to be and are not as supportive as they need to be. I'll let you know, in my community, we have a law enforcement system that anytime they make an arrest, specifically with domestic violence involved, they're charged with calling Child Protective Services whether or not the child was there when the incident occurred. So we already have a system that is bringing in and overlapping with the criminal justice system, having the child welfare system and the dynamics of domestic violence. And so we have all these eyes and from systems that tend to be more punitive than supportive. And then if there are other issues like a substance use disorder, the punitive nature seems to bubble to the top without really looking at what supports are needed and are underlying to stop what's going on in the circumstance and the dynamic of the power and control, and being able to understand that, and being able to understand how the substance use disorder may be playing into those dynamics of power and control. And so I think what it takes is time for dedicated professionals to really pull apart the pieces of a family's circumstances to understand the nature and the nexus of what's going on. But oftentimes we have so many of these cases coming in and we make assumptions and our bias starts playing in that we start moving it forward in a certain way and it starts being business as normal. Family violence, drug use, take the kids away. Family violence, drug use, take the kids away. Put the perpetrator over here, then that survivor is doing all the work, and then we close the case, maybe kids go home, never really held the perpetrator accountable, and then we have perpetrator coming right back into the situation, triggering someone who may be in recovery, and then the child welfare system coming right back. And we're just repeating this cycle, and it seems like insanity, right? And unless we start really dissecting why things are happening and how they play off of each other, and we take the time as professionals to put the effort into learning a family and understanding a family, we're never going to get a different result. And it's having a way to do that and being committed to it, why I think this intersection and understanding the intersection is so important. And then especially from the data that we've been seeing, when you look at how race plays into it as well, you're seeing that it's exacerbated for Black families and families of color where it may not need to be because there are ways that we can work with them without bringing in the systemic inequities that exacerbate those situations. So that would be kind of my thought about the intersection and why this is so important.
Thank you, Judge. Do any of our other panelists want to add to that about the intersection?
Well, I'll just say I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think one of the things that you're speaking to here is that what we have in the child welfare system are intersecting sort of inequities around race and around gender, right? So that's, I think, a really important area to sort of stay focused on. And I think that we talk about I think there's sort of common knowledge about disproportionality in child welfare and how, the mandated reporter sort of surveillance system funnels families in, and it's, rife with racial bias and all of that. We know that law enforcement sort of feeds into that. We know that schools feed into that. There's a lot of ways that happens. And then we've got within the child welfare system itself, the bureaucracy of child welfare, right? The tools that we use, how we sort of understand risk assessment, those kinds of things that continue to sort of contribute to that problem. The other thing that happens in child welfare systems, of course, is that, and this is based on my experience, I worked as a national consultant on a lot of child welfare initiatives in a lot of different states over the course of my career. And I have yet to work in a child welfare system that actually holds mothers and fathers to the same standards of parenting. And I'm saying mothers and fathers, even though we know that partner violence can occur in all kinds of relationships. We know that men can also be, you know, survivors of domestic violence. We know that gender nonconforming folks, trans folks, et cetera, like can all, their, you know, intimate partner violence sort of cuts across all of that. And the reality still is that within the child welfare system, again, sort of from my, I've been at this for 20 some years now, so it's a long time. You know, the ways that we sort of have different expectations of moms and dads, you know, we see things like case plans for somebody who has used violence and has a substance abuse problem. And what's on their case plan is go to battering intervention and go to substance abuse treatment. And then on the mom's case plan, we have, you know, all kinds of sort of parenting expectations about getting kids to doctors and making sure that the kids are supported educationally and all of these things. And that convergence of those sort of institutional biases around race and gender, I think really do trap a lot of survivors of color, right, in a very difficult position. And then when you think about the kinds of things that people have already been talking about here a little bit, which are ways that people who use violence use substance abuse coercion tactics to further sort of constrain their partners, right? And I'm not saying this is true for all people who use violence. It's certainly not. There's a lot of variation within that group. They're not a homogeneous group. But there is a way that people who use violence sort of tap into the places where survivors are most vulnerable. And so there's a lot of controlling access to, you know, drugs, access to treatment, interrupting recovery, interfering with parenting, you know, related to the violence, and also involving other systems like child welfare, like judges, like, you know, like courts, like treatment programs, in this way of thinking about survivors as being sort of responsible for keeping their kids safe, regardless of the fact that they are also sort of being controlled through their substance use, as well as threats and actual lived experiences of violence. So it's a really difficult position. And one of the things I'll say this, and then I know I'm talking a lot, so I'll stop so other panelists can chime in here. But one of the things, Judge, that you said that I think is so powerful is, you know, the work is really about sort of understanding families' unique needs, because they don't all need the same thing. They don't all need the same treatment, the same services, the same responses, right? But what we have are systems that are designed to funnel people into services that we have instead of trying to provide families with what they actually need to heal and recover and to become healthier. So we end up with a situation where we're trying to fix families through a limited and select set of services instead of fixing our systems to become more flexible and more responsive to the individual needs of families and survivors and people who use violence as well, right, who have differential needs based on all kinds of things like racial identity, like their current access to services, like their, you know, so we talk about families who can't access services because they're limited English speakers instead of talking about programs that don't provide linguistically accessible services. So, you know, the challenges are real, and I think the answer is, or at least one of the answers is, to create systems that have more flexibility within them to respond to what families actually want and need instead of plugging families in to what we already have.
I just want to jump in, and I'm going to be very brief and short. I agree with everything that Shelley and the judges just said. But I remember when I came into this field also, there was not the collaborative efforts that we have now. And there's room for a lot of growth and a lot of understanding and looking at the big picture, as you both have so eloquently just described, when we look at all the complexities. However, one of the things the statements always was made was, okay, well, we got to get them sober first. And that's extremely important. I'm from a family where addiction has been, you know, very prevalent. I have a brother who's over 30 plus consistent years of recovery, so I know it very well. However, when we look at that statement, it's a way of rethink, and I mean the group of all of us, all the providers, all the systems that have been mentioned already, right? So one of the statements is we have to get them sober first. And our side from intimate partner violence, that's what we have to keep them alive, okay? It's not going to matter if they're safe if they're not living, you know. So it was really that whole kind of attitude, even as I say it. You see my body language? So it's always been that kind of thinking of, well, we got to get them sober first. Well, no, we got to get them to safety first. And I think when we begin to collaborate and really not be as maybe as territorial, but really think about, and not trying to make our statistics and get our numbers, but to do as Shelley, when her concluding comments, to find out what this family really needs and how we really can do it. And, you know, a good way to do that is to talk to the family first, you know, and find out what we've done. Because a lot of times we have our minds made up what the treatment plan is going to be, how long it's going to take, who's going to parenting, and who's going to battering intervention, how long is that going to happen? Well, what if they get kicked out? We have set limits, and not limits, but set guidelines of what we're going to do for family before we even have said, hello, how are you? What's going on? Can you tell me your story? So I think when we go, and that's why I want to be brief with mine and be simplistic. I think it is simplistic, but I think it's also monumental. I mean, I think it's a big, one of the bigger pieces that we need to do more of, talking to the family, finding out what they're willing to do. Just because I send you to drug and alcohol treatment does not mean it's going to work. I know people who have come through drug and alcohol. You know, I would pick whatever you say, 90 days, and day 91, they drank. They knew they were going to drink when they went in. They went 90 days without drinking for the value of what it meant to them to get their children back. Because people will do a lot based on getting their kids back. They can do a lot, but making it stick is going to make a difference of meeting them where they are in the beginning. So just want to make sure I shared that. So thank you.
And then there was a quick follow-up question in the chat as far as asking the family what their needs are. How early should this conversation take place?
Immediately when they come into whichever system they come into. That's about as soon as we can. I mean, that first phone call, you know, I will say at intimate partner violence and domestic violence at our program at Women's Center Shelter, one of the first ways survivors come into our program is through phone call, you know, and that's also our preference. It doesn't quite happen the same way for BIP, but it is one of the first things we do. We get our referrals from other sources. That's why I say it's not the first one. So the perpetrator, the person using abuse, power, and control has already been told that he, and I'm saying he because our program is pretty cisgendered, all men coming to the program. There are other programs in Allegheny County. I'm speaking about ours right now. So he's already been told that he has to come in prior to us meeting him, you know. So our first tactic is, hello, how are you? How are you doing? So you've been referred to this program. Let me tell you how it works, and not to start off with, like, you know, giving him, well, this is it. This is what you have to do. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. But really finding his story. That's, and the same thing for the survivors who call, male or female, LGBTQ plus, anyone who calls our hotline is, hello, how are you? How can I be of assistance to you? What do you need? So.
Thank you.
Can I respond, Tessa? Of course, sorry. I just saw another question about what do you do when a family is not responsive to the question, what do you need? Which I think is a really important one. And it's interesting because, you know, it's not an uncommon experience. And in my mind, I think that's a reflection of the fact that people aren't used to being asked what they need. So, so the sort of being able to sort through, you know, and to have somebody actually ask that in an authentic way and be responsive, I think is, you know, should be happening more. And maybe as we start asking the questions more, people will be able to do that more easily. But I guess what I would say about it is it takes time, right? It takes time to develop a relationship with a family, whether that's a survivor or a person using violence or kids, who, you know, for them to be able to trust that when you ask the question that you're actually going to do something with it. So that would be I think we operate a lot on sort of bureaucracy time. Things need to get done within a certain time frame. We have, you know, an investigation period, et cetera. But I think what we have to do is to recognize that, you know, trauma and experiences of violence sort of also skews for people, you know, how they sort of perceive how change happens. And so, you know, I think that being patient can go a long way to resolving that. And I think it's a matter of developing that trust.
And I'll add, Shelley, that we have to be culturally responsive too, right? Because needing help or asking for help is not really acceptable in certain cultures. And so you have to be mindful of the family that you're dealing with, about their culture, and the ways in which you can offer assistance that would be culturally responsive. And that's another piece to layer into that.
I often will say it's what is not said is also just as important as what is said, and being open to hear that, authentically listening. It's not just asking the question, it's authentically listening and listening for what isn't said, because a person may not, because of shame, blame, and guilt, and cultural acceptance, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've all touched on a little bit about this whole family approach, serving the family and talking about what the family needs. I would love to hear more from all of you about what that means, how working through the whole family approach can ensure child safety through serving the survivor and the perpetrator. Maybe Kim or Rhonda, do you want to start with that question?
I will, Kim, unless you want to. Okay, I'll jump in there. I think we still have a long way to go with that, because I think it's still very siloed. And I think, Judge also mentioned that as well in her comments, right? So we have the family, and, the survivor victim is at the shelter with her children. The offending parent, who, again, like I said, I'm speaking on men just simply because I still work with. I understand. I never want to act like I don't or come across as I don't. However, so the father, who may be the one who's using abuse, power, and control in the situation, is left out. He's not involved oftentimes. And oftentimes there's very limited attempts made to get him involved. I am pleased to say that in Allegheny County at our child welfare, which we generally say CYF, Children, Youth, Families, but at our CYF program and our collaboration, they do have a department, FES, Fathers Engagement Specialists, and it is their role to really reach out and get the fathers engaged. And we're becoming more proactive with that department, as well as in our CYF advocates and our CYF specialists at Women's Center and Shelter, collaborating greater to get the father engaged, to really have him involved, because we do want a holistic approach. And again, we do have the children's program at Women's Center and Shelter. We do have survivors and children at Women's Center and Shelter. But I'm just be honest and transparent. I think we have a long way to go with really working with the family in a more holistic way, because again, I can't minimize this. I don't want to minimize it. We still have a very strong focus on, and this is necessary, keeping the survivors safe. I just look forward to when we can have some focus groups and have more conversations from the survivors about what could we have done differently for you that would have kept you safe and possibly engaged the abusing parent, because so often, let's be real, they go back, and statistically it takes 7 times for a survivor to leave an abusive relationship. So this is the survivor's first, second, third time. They're most likely going back again. So how about if we back up and not back up and include, not preclude anything we're already doing, but how about if we include working more directly with and we do this, but I think there still has to be a stronger focus on this, and I think there has to be more collaborative programs to do this as well. So I think I know we'll continue to do this with our CYF Father Engagement Specialist program, as well as looking at ways that we can do this more holistically at Women's Center and Shelter as well. Yeah. Kim, thank you.
I agree. We have a long way to go. We talk a lot at the department about fatherhood engagements across the agency, not just related to domestic violence. But I think, and Shelley, you had pointed this out earlier, that we're the first primary parent that we're talking about around parenting is our moms. So we do have a long way to go. In particular, I think this cross-system education is important. From a child welfare perspective, I do think our workforce is I don't want to use the word afraid, not physically afraid. They're not sure how to engage a father. Even the workforce doesn't know how to engage a father. So it's easier to just work with mom and go along their way. And it's a real disservice to the family. And we're working on that. And I think we have to be intentional about that. And you're right, we refer to fatherhood engagement or an intimate partner program, and then mom goes off and does her work, and there really is no cross systems. And sometimes it's just child welfare who's addressing the issue together, not in the same room with safe contact, obviously, but it is child welfare who's the bridge between those services at times. So I think the silos is a huge area that we as a system need to get better at.
Can I just share
back in there real quick?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Rhonda.
Just real quick. I just real quick want to piggyback to Judge Aurora is bringing up, and so has Sullivan, bringing up race disparities and racism, and that's one thing. If you really look at it, it is so easy to ignore fathers of color because there has been such a message in our nation that they don't exist, and that's not true. If you look for a father, he is there, and I can tell you for sure, if you give him the opportunity and ask him, he wants to be involved. I'm not going to say 100%, but I'm going to tell you it is a large proportion of men who come to our program, the Battering Intervention program, and we ask them one of the things, what would you want to be different? I don't want my kids to grow up, whether he has a daughter or a son, I don't want my kids to grow up like this. I want to change for my kids. And these are some fathers who've been estranged from their kids for years. They still want to make that difference, okay? My passion's rising up. I'm going to calm down, and thank you, Shelley, for letting me jump in there.
Of course. I just wanted to say one thing. One of our partners on the National Quality Improvement Center is an organization called Caminar Latino out of Atlanta. And actually their national initiative, which is Latinos United for Peace and Equity, is very involved in the QUIC as technical assistance providers and coaches and so forth. And the reason I wanted to just mention them, and you could go to the website and find out more, but they have for years and years and years been doing work with the whole family. And that doesn't mean that they put everybody in the room together and offer them the same services, right? But they do, whole families show up to their facility at the same time. And the men go to their group on one floor, and the women go to their group on another floor, and the kids, are cared for sort of somewhere in between. And they have a program that has been very effective and worked in the Latinx community. And that has existed for a very long time. So there are actually models that are more sort of holistic. And I would agree with both of you, Kim and Rhonda, that for a lot of systems, we have a long way to go. But I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are places that are actually doing this kind of work and doing it really well.
Thank you all. And please never stifle your passion, Rhonda. That's not what we want to do here by any means. So I think we've got some good questions coming in. So let's take a couple of those. Our very first question came in at the beginning, and it was, is there any financial assistance for people seeking treatment who don't have insurance? And I'm not sure if that was about domestic violence treatment or substance abuse treatment, or maybe both. Thoughts on that?
For domestic violence, for the survivors, and this is pretty true nationwide, I can't say it's 100%, but certainly at Women's in the Shelter and all our programs in our local and surrounding areas outside of Pittsburgh, that there is no fee for survivors of intimate partner violence, so there's no fee for them to get services. Our Battering Intervention program works off of a sliding scale, so we do, there is a fee for the participants, and part of that is a big part of what we do nationwide with Battering Intervention is this word called accountability. And I think if you put 10 of us in the room together, you're going to get 10 different ways that we say what accountability really means. So one of the things we talk about when we say the fees are assessed, the fees partially are assessed because of teaching men around accountability. You can't just come. I mean, if any of us think about it, anything that you have put some money towards, you're a little more likely to do that program or finish whatever it is that you have to do. I went to college on a parental scholarship. My dad worked at the university, and if I dropped the class, all I had to do was go sign another paper to take the class over. When I actually became more of an adult and realized that that was very irresponsible, and if I had a chance to do it over, I really would do it again. But if I was paying money out of my pocket, I bet I would have dropped 2 or 3 fewer classes than I did. So there are fees associated for battering intervention. And we need more funding. I'll put my shameless plug out there. We need more funding nationwide for battering intervention. If we're going to
I'll say, I know,
families.
yeah, I know in most places there is funding also for substance use treatment. A lot of state funding is usually available, and many of the treatment facilities may also take Medicaid. I know in Texas we go through a lot of our local mental health authorities to get evaluations and assessments, and then they assist with funding, just so people know.
You know, Judge Aurora, here in Allegheny County, a lot of the men cannot be. They're required by CYF, child welfare, to go get these assessments, and they can't afford them, and they're upwards of $250. So we have a lot of men, you know, and some men do get some resources and figure out how to get them done, but there are a lot of places here that do charge for the initial assessment.
Yeah.
Rhonda, while we're on you, somebody asked if you could recommend a good BIP curriculum.
Well, you know, we use a hybrid here. We use a hybrid of the Duluth model and the Emerge model. And then we also use one of the things that we pride ourselves on in our men's program is being able to be real with the men. So when we start our groups and we start a check-in, and say out of 15 men, 5 or 6 men have something very similar that they're saying in their check-in, we put the handouts aside, we put the notepad aside or whatever, and we talk about what's going on right now. Let's delve into the emotions of what you're dealing with this week so that we can keep it in real time. So we do add to ours in our county. The HS who funds us is aware of that for sure. However, on paper, we do the hybrid of Duluth and Emerge models.
Can I also just throw into the mix here a little plug for another model, which is Strong Fathers, which is not something that we're testing. So Allegheny County is one of our project sites on the QUIC. Kim's from another one of them, Massachusetts, UCF, which it has been implementing Strong Fathers through their same organization that does their Intimate Partner Abuse Education program. And we're starting it in our Illinois project as well. And Strong Fathers is a curriculum. It's a responsible fatherhood program that is a curriculum that was developed by Joan Pinnell, who's on our National Advisory Committee, and a number of other folks. But it's specifically for child welfare involved fathers who have been using partner violence. Now, I don't think that there's a specific sort of substance use component to it, but I just wanted to say, like, it has some evidence behind it, you know, like battering intervention programs do. There is some evidence behind the Strong Fathers program. So that's another program that people might want to learn more about.
I saw a couple of questions. If Rhonda and Shelley, you wouldn't mind typing into the chat the names of those programs so people can access them.
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you. We have a question. Are there trainings available to court teams specific working with IPV and child welfare?
I don't know if there are some specific trainings on working on that intersection, but my court is happy to share our model of how we've been able to bring in our advocacy organization and kind of how that referral works and how we make sure that our participants in our court are able to actively engage. And it's been a huge support and resource, especially because they do have housing options and they have case managers. They're able to really make very specific safety plans and also educate us. They do a lot of education for the whole team so that we all understand, because we're a multidisciplinary team working with our families, and not everybody is as adept and competent in the dynamics of domestic violence. And so they have been able to come and be a big, valuable resource for us, and then also for the participants, regardless of whether or not they currently identify as having had an experience of being in a domestic violence relationship. So I would put us out there. Tessa, feel free to share information for contact with my court, and we're happy to share our model.
Thank you so much, Judge.
I have to admit I missed the question because I was typing the program name into the chat box. But it sounds like you offered a pretty good response.
The question was about trainings. I'm guessing this came from a family treatment court person. So trainings for court teams, so multidisciplinary child welfare attorneys, substance use providers around IPV and child welfare.
We provide training for our CYF program, so that's part of the collaboration, and we've been doing that for 20-some years as well. So we do training on IPV with incoming caseworkers, or I really shouldn't name the title because they have different titles, but with incoming staff to the system, as well as veteran training that we offer as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. We have a question about are there best practices or promising practices around domestic violence and substance use for adolescents? Kim, do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm off mute. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. There is, it's not specific to domestic violence, but if you review the model, its adolescent community reinforcement approach is an evidence-based treatment that for substance use disorders, it's really the only one of the few, I'll be safer and say one of the few evidence-based treatment approaches for adolescents. And it really looks at building pro-social coping skills. And if an adolescent, I'm not sure if it's the domestic violence, I'm assuming it's a child who's been impacted or an adolescent who's been impacted by domestic violence, and thus we might project that this is a youth who might be coping with substances. I would recommend looking into, again, the ACRA. It's for short ACRA, Adolescent Community Reinforcement Approach. I don't know if you have that in your state, but it is worth looking into, and there are trainings. It's quite extensive to get trained to do that approach, but if you find it, I would definitely consider referring for that program.
Thank you. So there were a couple questions that came through about timelines. Now we know when child welfare and substance use are involved, timelines for AFSA or the Adoption and Safe Families Act is tricky to say the least. And so when we add domestic violence into the mix, I'm wondering what your thoughts are in general around AFSA timelines, which is what requires kids to be in permanent homes within 12 months. Judge, I'll open that up to all of you. Thoughts on that?
Sure, and I can start off. Timelines has been a huge issue for our Family Drug Treatment Court, and I'm very proud that we've been doing this work for some time, because initially we started where all of our cases were with children in foster care. There was initially a removal, and then we started working with the parents. And we learned very quickly, even just dealing with the substance use disorder, that 1 year was not even enough to expect somebody to change their entire life. And then you talk about the intersection with domestic violence and how much time it takes to really work with people changing their mindset and the way they interact in their relationship with each other, and even figuring out what their relationship will look like if it will continue to look like something. And so there were so many aspects that went into trying to get things done that we wanted to also make sure we balance the, of course, permanency for a child, but what also is in the best interest of that child, right? Because if we tried to move too fast, we didn't want to misstep. And if we took too long, we didn't want to linger. And we utilized every tool that we had, like an extension, to give a little bit more time, and then looking at whenever we do a return, and we have our return and monitor in Texas, that's a 6-month observation monitoring period before the deadline comes, and we're done. So we had so many things to balance, but what we ended up ultimately doing was looking at how we can be involved as a court system without having to do the removal and initiating that timeline of a child in foster care. And so we shifted our program, and in Texas we have a statute that allows us to have mandated court services without doing a removal. And we utilize that statute. It's not used all over the state, but there are some communities and jurisdictions that are using it to have court oversight in a court-ordered services case. So we have orders for required participation. We have the ability to work with the parents and work with the children and be able to make sure we're moving at the pace that the family needs without having the deadlines, because we haven't moved into a place where we're trying to reunify. We're at a place of preservation. And especially for child welfare, I'm very hopeful that with the implementation of the Family First Preventative Services Act, that we can move to the place of prevention, provide more supports and funding really to get those preventative services, because if you think about it, that act is really looking at children who are at risk of being in foster care, and those are these kids. But we can do things to help preserve the family to prevent that, and I think it would fall under, in the way that I envision it. Of course, it's still being implemented in so many states trying to work through it, but I envision a place where we're reimagining the system, right, where we're really moving to a space of prevention and how we're working with families so that we don't even have to get into a system that starts the timelines and starts the clocks ticking, because I completely agree, it is not enough time. I mean, I can't talk about how many times I've tried to do something as simple as go on a diet and lose weight or change a bad habit. And I don't often be successful in doing those things. So I can't imagine something as extraordinary as recovering from substance use disorder, from recovering from a domestic violence situation, and parenting to the standard of all these eyes watching you at the same time. So I agree the timeline is not enough. And I think each family is unique in how the pace of the case should go. And if there are alternatives moving into that prevention space, I think that's what we should be looking at. And it sounds like this new federal law is going to help support doing that kind of work.
Can I tag in on that for a minute? Less about the timelines part and more about the prevention and the Family First legislation. So one thing I just want to say about that is, you know, domestic violence isn't called out within the Family First legislation. However, as we all know, right, domestic violence is happening in the same families where the things that are called out, like, you know, mental health issues and substance abuse issues and so forth, are happening. So I just want to put in a plug for anyone who is involved in an effort to develop a state plan to respond to the Family First legislation, to make sure that you have DV partners at the table, because if you don't, you're going to miss an entire, you know, an entire sort of area of work that needs to happen in order to really address the kids who are at risk of removal, which is what the legislation is really sort of focused on, those prevention efforts. So just a plug, make sure that you've got your DV folks at the table when you're developing those state plans.
Our statewide coalition,
and I say Judge Jones for president.
Our statewide coalition, Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Policy and Legislative Committee is going to look at Family First. We don't have it right now. We're not involved right now, so they're going to look at it. But our CEO, Nicole has said very clearly that if our statewide coalition does not follow up with it, very likely we will when the Senator Shelter. So you're right, Shelley. It's very important for us to get our voice. And you know what? That's the thing with inter-partner violence, domestic violence. With domestic violence, we consistently have to edge our way in, push our way in. So if we're not thought about at first, we have to make sure we're like, hello there. You know, we need to have a voice here, but that's what advocacy is all about. And I will say that advocacy has been fantastic in the field of domestic violence for many years. And I don't say this to be funny, but I don't worry about losing a job around their stillman, maybe for other reasons, but certainly not because there's not enough work. There's always another area that we need to pay closer attention to. And Judge Aurora, Shelley, you talked about it so good at the beginning when we were talking about the fact of looking at racial disparities and discrimination and racism, and tie that into the child welfare system, and tie that into domestic violence, and tie all of that together with incarceration and family separation. There's still a lot of work we have yet to do.
And if I could just put in one little shameless plug here for, we're testing, the thing that we're doing on the quick is we're testing an adult and child survivor-centered approach to addressing domestic violence. And as part of that, one of the things that we are building and promoting is the use of protective factors, building protective factors with survivors of violence. So we're trying to help people think about moving away from, managing risk or sort of seeing only the ability to interrupt safety threats as sort of the work, and instead trying to get people, and by people I mean not just the child welfare system, but we have large, broadly representative sort of collaborations in each of our projects. And what we're trying to do is to align the practice around building and promoting protective factors for survivors. We did a review of the research. Charlene Harper Brown at the Center for the Study of Social Policy, which is another one of our national partners, who is very involved in developing the original Strengthening Families protective factors that a lot of child welfare agencies use, was leading the work around, searching the literature for protective factors for survivors. So those, and you could read more about those at our website, which is dvchildwelfare.org. I know that's going to be in the resource guide that's distributed, or maybe already has been distributed. But those protective factors for survivors, and this is important because anybody who's interacting with survivors can play a role in building and promoting them, right? Not just DV advocates, not just substance abuse treatment providers, not just child welfare folks, anybody. So those protective factors for survivors are safer and more stable conditions, not surprisingly, social, cultural, and spiritual connections, resilience and a growth mindset, nurturing parent-child interactions, and social and emotional abilities. So there's a lot of ways that those 5 protective factors can be promoted and supported with survivors of domestic violence, and that can happen in a prevention setting, or in a child welfare setting, or in a faith community, or in a treatment program. So I just wanted to say, that I think that's a real shift that, we're trying to get people to make, is to think about how do you move away from only thinking about managing risk and instead helping families, as we've all been talking about, right, build toward a healthier and safer future for themselves.
Thank you, Shelley. That was really helpful. Similarly, we've seen a couple questions come in, and there's a brave person sharing her personal experience in the chat as well about more services for children or family strengthening programs. Has anyone been using Celebrating Families to help address? I know they have some domestic violence pieces in place, or anything else you can speak to as far as more services to children affected by these issues, or the family unit together?
So our Massachusetts project they were on a planning path toward implementing Celebrating Families, which is really primarily sort of a substance abuse intervention, but there is a DV, they were sort of adapting it and strengthening the DV part of it. And I think it has real potential. It's sort of a parent-child model of, dealing with sort of both issues. And the challenge that we ran into is COVID hit. And so, the ability to sort of move forward, implementing a brand new program and building all the relationships that need to be built and so forth, they actually had to let go of it because we're actually coming into our final year of our work with our projects. But I think the Celebrating Families model is a great model to look at.
I would like to add, I was part of working with what that, as we were planning that, I think what did become apparent, and I think we've talked a little bit about that here today, is the importance of those relationships just in our planning meetings. We met multiple times in planning that, and the amount I learned during just sitting with my partners weekly to plan this, and the nuances of running a group that has both substance use disorders and domestic violence, and having both of those issues being addressed in a parenting program was fascinating, and really just underscored for me the importance that we are cross-educating across all systems, and having our partners understanding our mandates and what it's like to come into a program, and then what is it like to have somebody come in and might be in withdrawal. What do you do with that in a DV program? Or so it was a fascinating program, and it's a great model.
We're running out of time. I know there was a couple questions coming in about how work has addressed or has changed due to COVID, and we're not going to be able to directly dive into that. I do want to say, though, one positive silver lining thing that came out as we're talking about celebrating families is I know they've begun some work to move to a virtual platform, which could have some pretty great long-lasting effects. So look into that. They have information on their website. So we're going to close out with our panelists with our one final question. In one or two sentences, what advice do you have for teens who want to do this work? Maybe a practice to implement, the first step, anything along those lines. So Rhonda, can I start with you?
Certainly. Thank you, Tessa. You know, I think the answer is in the question. What would I say to people who want to do this work? That's the first step. You have to want to do this. I say this to my team all the time. This is hard work. It has to be done, and it is hard work. I don't want to be discouraging to anyone, because if you have the passion, the willpower, and it takes willpower, but if you have the passion and the knowledge and the skill and the want, you believe that families can change, you believe that people who use abuse, power, and control can change, then you're on the right path to doing it. Volunteer somewhere.
Thank you, Rhonda. Kim?
Yes. You know, I would say to keep our ears open and moving from the what's wrong with her from a child welfare perspective. And if I was thinking of what I would say for my child welfare or substance use disorder treatment folks, is moving to what happened to her. What is the story, or him? To be sure that we're referring families for integrated treatments for all co-occurring issues, and to be addressing family holistically for housing insecurities, mental health, trauma, DV, that it really, treatment needs to be integrated. And to be sure that we're knowing about best practices as it relates to trauma. And the treatment modalities that we're using, and kind of think deeper about what it means for somebody to, as I started with, to think about what it means for somebody to say, to surrender as a survivor, or to admit powerlessness, what that is doing to the psyche for folks, and to unpack that with people. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Kim. Judge Martinez-Jones, your advice.
Yeah, and I think about this advice, especially with a couple of the comments that I saw about being in the court system, and right, if we're talking about teens, or we're talking about judges, or we're talking about lawyers, and the power and control that we do have, and not perpetuating that dynamic and re-victimizing the survivors who we have in our court. And so my advice would be to keep that in mind and lead with the example that you would want from them. And by that I mean transparency, letting them know what to expect. As a court, when I'm building a relationship with some of our parents, I let them know that I will be honest with them, and I will let them know as much as I can what to expect and what's going to happen, so that they have some understanding, and then I give them a voice in it to have a way to communicate their position and what they're thinking without being punitive. And so thinking of them as part of the team that is working on their case, and making sure their input is considered and part of the way that decisions are made, because we know we have to stay away from the shame and the guilt and being punitive in nature when we're trying to be supportive and trauma-informed in how we work with our families. And so that would be the advice that I would give, is that you can start with your example and how you interact, because we are the ones with the power. We are the ones with the control. We are the ones that could lead them to feeling shame, to feel guilt, and to feel like they're being punished by the system all over again. So that's what I would provide.
Thank you, Judge. And Shelley, your last words.
Yeah, so first let me apologize for having to get off screen for a minute. I got a lawnmower situation happening outside my window here, so I was trying to close the window so it wouldn't be too noisy. I don't have any control over it. I apologize for that. I would say a couple of things, and one of them is very specific and sort of small, but therefore probably really doable, and that is, and maybe this is a little bit like preaching to the choir, so I apologize if it feels too basic for some folks, but I would say, rather than talking to survivors of domestic violence about their substance use only, ask them and explore with them the ways that their partner has used that to continue to control them, because it gives you a very different foundation from which to build trust with a survivor who otherwise may think that you are not understanding her situation. So from a very practical perspective, I think, asking about tactics that the partner is using that are related to the substance use is important. I do think the other thing I'll say, which is a much bigger picture issue, I think, is creating sort of broad-based partnerships around these issues so that you are involving people. Like, for example, I talked about the protective factors earlier. There are a lot of people who families interact with who could be building and promoting those protective factors with survivors in ways that will help some families stay out of the child welfare system, out of the court, as well as helping the families who are involved. And I think those same folks at the table can have an enormous role to play in a coordinated and a collaborative response to accountability. And when we talk about accountability on the QUIC, we're talking about both relational and sort of systemic strategies. So again, you can read more about that on our website. But we're trying to get people to move away from thinking about law enforcement and courts as sort of the accountability that we're trying to create, and instead trying to create more of a community version of accountability that honors sort of people's natural connections and really uses those natural supports to build in both accountability for violence and, at the same time, support for change. Because both of those things need to happen at the same time. We can't just talk about accountability for abusive behaviors anymore. A whole family approach requires that we also support a person's change process.
Thank you, Shelley. Well, as you all can tell, we have barely scratched the surface here with this topic. I think we could have had an entire 90-minute webinar with each of our panelists individually. So we're sorry we couldn't do that. However, I know all of them are willing to continue connecting. Their contact information is in their bios, which is in the agenda that you can find in the handout. A lot of the resources that were shared will be in the resource guide that we'll be sending out. So please keep an eye on those. Also, feel free to reach out to us at fcc@cffutures.org. I will put my personal email in the chat box if you want to reach out. We love to hear what people are doing in this work. Questions you may have, we know we didn't get to everything by any means. We just want to say thank you to our panelists. Thank you all for joining us, for prepping for this, for the work that you do and here, for sharing all of this through the equity lens, which is so vital right now. And I think we might have a new candidate for president. So if nothing else came out of this, I think, we got that. So again, thank you all for joining us. Keep your comments coming. I am going to pass things back over to William. And William, one thing I'm wondering if you can address is if there's any way for people to save the chat or to get the chat, because there's been a lot of great resources put into there. So thank you from me, from our panelists, and from Children and Family Futures. William?
All right, great. Thank you very much, Tessa. And again, thank you to our audience for joining a very wonderful and great cafe conversation that we've had for today. Before we let you all go, we do have just a couple of last-minute items that we'd like to go over before we adjourn. So the first thing that we wanted to do is just to sorry, let me go to the right slide here. If you'd like to get in contact with OJJDP's INTAC, you can access the this link here where you can get more information about us, or you can even click on the link or even text 228 to INTAC in order to get on our listserv to get access or even availability about more great webinars like this that we have. You can also check us out on OJJDP TTA on Facebook. Also note that if you'd like to get in contact with OJJDP's Help Desk, you may do so through the telephone number in the email address that's located here. You can also go to their website or even click the link here to sign up to their for their listserv. Tessa, in regards to your point for any of the resources that we have here in the chat. If you want to get access to those resources, we have no problem sending those to you as well. Just feel free to reach out to us at OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov or call that number, and we'll be sure to get those links to you all that have been put in the chat here with no problem. The other thing I'd like to let you all know is in regards to the training and technical assistance need that you may have for your respective organization. If you do have a TTA need, you can reach out via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform, where you can submit a request if you'd like. You can access it through that link that's posted here, where you can create your own profile, and we have no problem with getting you any type of TTA assistance that you may need. In regards to the recording for today, please note that it will be located on our NTAC YouTube page as well as CFF's page. They provide the link in the chat here, and we can also send it back out to you all as well if you need access to get the recording for today's webinar. Note that we also have archived webinars there, and you can also reach out to OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov to get access to any supporting materials related to webinars as well. I'd like folks to take a moment to please review the attribution and disclaimer slide here. I'll give you all just a couple of seconds to review this. And then finally, we do have an online evaluation that is available for you all to complete at the end of the webinar. Everyone will get the evaluation when we do conclude today's webinar as well. It'll pop up automatically for you on your screen. If you could please take a few moments to complete that evaluation, it'd be much appreciated. Also, please note that we have these upcoming webinars here. I'm being told, let's see. Oh, in regards to the certificate for today, please note that individuals will receive an automated certificate via the Adobe Connect email address, email that you'll receive to your email address for those who are signed in. For folks who are not signed in, again, if you joined in the group, please fill out that group validation form so that we can get the names of those individuals, and we'll be sure for you to get your certificate there. Join us for a couple of upcoming webinars that we have. We have some webinars coming up with our colleagues at Zero Abuse. You can also click on these to register for other webinars that we have coming up with, again, our colleagues at Zero Abuse and also with the Western Regional. And then finally, the final thing that I have for you all today is to complete our exit poll here. We want to know, how do you plan on applying this information from this webinar to your work? Please note that this is multiple choice or multiple select, meaning that you can choose more than one answer here. So I'll leave this up for a couple of more seconds. If you could, please let us know this information, because it's very helpful for us in our work. If you have any other questions, again, feel free to reach out to us. Again, I want to thank everyone for a wonderful presentation. Thank you, our presenters. Thank you to our colleagues at Children and Family Futures. Everyone have a great afternoon, and be safe. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all.
Thank you.
The host has left the meeting, so at this time, the meeting will come to an end. Thank you and goodbye.